Thank you, everyone. Hi. I'd like to thank, as we all have, but I'd like to thank Fast Forward. I'd like to thank Vintage Photo Festival and this really lovely Center for Contemporary Art for hosting us today. It's really wonderful to be in dialogue with all of you, thinking about the vital work of women in photography and the power of collaborative scholarship. We're going to go kind of fast today because we need to. I'm excited to share the working relationship that I've developed with scholar Meg Jackson-Fox over the past few years. Our collaboration centers on our shared fascination with artist Hazel Larson Archer, a photographer whose legacy we've been working to recover and to recontextualize. Hazel taught photography at Black Mountain College in North Carolina from 1944 to 1953, creating much of the school's historical record, like this image of dancing, floating Merce Cunningham. She would later go on to build and teach workshops for photography and perception, and also teaching geometry in Tucson and Santa Fe. This image is actually the first picture that came into my consciousness as a young dancer. I knew this work because of my studies of Merce Cunningham, and it wasn't until my adult life that I realized that Hazel was the photographer. Our title, Between Archive and Inheritance, speaks to the space where formal documentation meets family memory, where scholarly research meets personal legacy and artistic production, and where care and collaboration become essential to understanding the full scope of an artist's impact. The majority of the archive is not accessible to the public. The estate of Hazel Larson Archer is held by her family, and Hazel's daughter, Erica Archer Zero, has shared much of Hazel's work with the Black Mountain College Museum archives, and they published a small book on Hazel's work in 2006. I'll be sharing some of that collaboration and collaborative work with you today, and including my own research findings. And you'll hear directly from Meg Jackson-Fox at the end of the presentation via video. She's very sorry that she was unable to make it. Before I dive into our collective research, let me share something about my own approach to this work as an artist. According to Hazel, the act of seeing, the act of making an image, is about one's presence with the experience of seeing itself. The perceptual is visceral, it is embodied, it is experience. Much of the way Hazel frames her questions of perception mirror my own, and as my own approach echoes the work of many other women whose ideas I orbit in the studio. For the past 3 years, I have been conjuring a proximity to Hazel across time and place, with her work, her family, and with others who have deeply connected to her archive. This intergenerational knowing is at the center of all of my work, and it's at the center of my teaching. Today, I would like to invite you into the experience of being with Hazel through our research.
Well, I love what you were saying about light. Can you read that part again?
I love that that's also what I picked up on, Erica.
Light is my means to time travel, using it as a location device to illuminate and interrogate the penumbra of photographic history where women's contributions have been obscured. The joy in staring at a star and not knowing if that star is still shining, in a way, it's kind of what it feels like to learn about your mother and the other women I'm studying. Like, they're still bright in my constellation. They're still shining. They're still present.
That's a beautiful analogy.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful, yeah. I think you're really on the right path with the idea of light and the way you're thinking of it as time traveling. And, I wish I cannot find that poem that I told you about, where she says she's a pinhole camera. That so that light can impress itself upon her.
Mm-hmm.
But I think where you're going with the light is really important in regards to how she felt about light.
For the last year, Meg Jackson Fox, who you saw in the video, and I have been in ongoing dialogue with Hazel's daughter, Erica Archer Zero, whose insights have been invaluable. The conversations are very slow and patience is required, and that's why you see a lot of editing in terms of filling in those pauses of deep thinking. This image is from last June when Erica shared a drawing Hazel made for her mother of their home in Milwaukee. Through this drawing and this image, I was able to find Hazel's childhood home, and I've begun making work there. This approach, spanning generations and bringing together different perspectives, has shaped not only what we've discovered about Hazel's work, but how we understand archival recovery itself. For me, much of the archival recovery has been about embodiment, locating a proximity to Hazel through geography and the light held there, sitting within the spaces that formed Hazel's philosophies of seeing. This is the view from her childhood home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, looking east toward Lake Michigan through those trees. Hazel spoke of her time convalescing from polio at the age of 10, when her bed was moved into the family room for her long recovery. She told stories of this time as being instrumental to her philosophy of seeing. Hazel's mobility was forever changed by polio. I plan to visit these windows over the seasons and watch the light change and sit in the space where she lay, observing and redefining our relationship with her body and the world.
Can an archive hold memory? Or does the archive hold the trigger to a memory, in the same way we think about a photograph?
I'm just wondering about that word.
Yeah.
I've thought about that a long time because she used to say that memory's a scar. That if we remember something, it's not a complete experience. The photograph is recording not necessarily what's there, but what you're seeing. And she made that distinction. And as we know, there's a lot more there than what we see. I think she referred to that when she was talking about vision, and that was what her work was all about, is why we see the way we do. Those are the questions Meg was posing so beautifully with the photographs. But
this is just one view of the installation that Meg did. She did in 2023. You can see there, have a small show of Hazel Larson's pictures at the Center for Creative Photography. And here she, I don't have a detail, but here underneath each photograph, she prompted with one of the questions that Hazel would ask her students about perception. And Meg created this space as a way to really engage the public with Hazel's work, but also her ideas about seeing. One of my favorite questions of Hazel's, and I've borrowed it for titles of some of my work, is whose eyes do you see through?
And if Hazel ever spoke about storytelling, because I know we're talking about memory, and how either in terms of the photograph or even in her pedagogical practices, how that might have shown up. Because the conversation around memory is so interesting from the position as a historian, because we tend to separate what it is to have a memory from what it is to create history, from what it is to be the past. And so all of these things kind of play with one, or what even the archive, right? So all of these things tend to be in conversation in some sort of way, and they all have different degrees in which they show up depending on who's building that history. But I do wonder, what was the sense of stories in that? Because if you're present in a moment, can stories also be a kind of scar, or is it something that had a different presence for her?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point because, she felt that we're not really seeing if we bring to bear any of our past experience. We can identify and name something. We have names for everything, but those names each conjure up a different image for each person. She talked a lot about that. That the city man will see an axe differently than a country man, and they're literally not the same thing. What's the difference between memory and revelation? And by that I mean the difference between a memory and what something can reveal. What she was helping everyone to see is that, can we just look and see without, the evaluation or creating a story around it.
Something I haven't asked you, Erica, is did Hazel tell stories about Black Mountain later in life, like when you were in Tucson or when you were in Santa Fe, or was it really more about the relationships rather than the stories of the experiences per se?
Well, that's what's funny, because she told a lot of stories. I mean, that was actually what I see as her way of teaching. It was always a story.
Now we'll hear from Meg.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Meg Jackson-Fox, and I currently work at the University of Chicago's Smart Museum of Art. And thank you all for having us, and I send my sincerest regrets to not be able to join you all in person. I am, however, thrilled for the opportunity to share just briefly about my work and our collaborative work on Hazel Larson Archer, who I've been studying since my tenure at the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson, Arizona, for the better part of the last 5 years. I wanted to offer a series of critical questions driving my own process in building or attempting to build a history that expands across Hazel's biography. One that does not begin and end with her historic tenure at Black Mountain College, which was a storied institution and an important moment in her own life, to be sure, but also her presence for less than a decade at Black Mountain neither fully realizes what brought this thinker and creative into being, nor does it account for the great extent of her influence, legacy, and life. I paired these 4 questions with a selection of Hazel's images and my installation images too, to continue to bring her into the space of our conversation, as Sonja so eloquently puts it. From the position as an art historian, how does one craft a study about an historical photographer and educator who is severely understudied, so very little is available already in the public sphere, and whose archival materials are primarily held by the family? You'll notice that the vast majority of the images that I have and I am sharing are drawn from Black Mountain College, actually, despite my previously stated goal to move her practice beyond that time in her life alone. Yet, in the public domain and readily accessible to me for the circumstances like this talk, or like an exhibition, the primary archive of images are from her Black Mountain years. The family does hold images and audio recordings from Tucson and Santa Fe, dating from approximately the mid-1950s to the 1980s, some of which you'll see here that she took in Tucson's, others that she took in Black Mountain. But those are shared in small quantities over time and following the establishment of trust. So how could I create meaning from photographs of which I've only seen very little, for example? This also means great care being given to building relationships with the family and with the community of people who knew Hazel. It's quite literally the long-duration research process. Relationships are crucial to accessing materials in the family archive. Another example, the family has letters to Hazel that span critical figures from a variety of mediums in the history of 20th century art in the United States. Buckminster Fuller, Annie Albers, Beaumont Newhall, Ray Johnson, Maris Cunningham. There are letters with valuable information in the family stewardship, but I can only read them in the moment in the hands of Hazel's daughter, who holds the archival box. So it's in my own memory then that I hope will hold up. Relationships also are the opportunity to gather oral histories through ongoing conversations, to expand my connections to Hazel's network through introductions from her family, and to gather ever more research and resources through a community of sharing. And of course, we most certainly welcome other ideas for non-traditional pathways into a study. As a second driving question, how does one honor the spirit and philosophies of Hazel, who believed memories to be a scar, and memories were inhibitors of experience and perception, and yet we still need to rely so deeply on the memories of her home family? Primary source materials are an evident solution. When access to the familial archive is limited, then other solutions have become looking through the archives of the institutions she worked at for any morsel of information about her, such as North Carolina State Archives, where Black Mountain College's archives are located, and the Tucson Museum of Art's institutional archives, where Hazel transformed practices in arts education when the museum was called the Tucson Art Center. It has also meant scouring the archives of the people in her orbit. For example, a colleague in California reached out when she discovered a film of Hazel speaking in Beaumont Newhall's archive. He and his wife, Nancy Newhall, encountered Hazel in Black Mountain, and Beaumont remained close to Hazel during her Tucson and Santa Fe years when they worked together. And these are images from the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson, Arizona, where we brought together images from the collection of Aaron Siskin and Harry Callahan, who were part of the network of Hazel's, together with Hazel's images to expand our understanding of her work. And studying the work of her students to better understand her, such as Linda McCartney, who took classes with Hazel in Tucson in the 1960s. I've also been interested in what can be learned from developing new experiences, such as in the space of an art exhibition, in creative work by teaching her photography and philosophies to students of all ages, whether through college courses, community engagement initiatives, or written histories. I've wondered, can a contemporary student-led community engagement project with a neighborhood center in Southside Tucson, a project which was rooted in Hazel's teaching, be considered research material when writing about the photographer? So in other words, can contemporary applications of her philosophy inform a better historical understanding of her? A third question, what new is there to discover about historical subjects at the intersection of the artist's impulses and interests and studies, and of the historian's impulses and interests and studies? My ongoing relationship with Sonja has inspired an openness to my own biography, pedagogical practice, and scholarly writing, as it also intersects Hazel's biography, pedagogical practice, and creative work. And repositioning myself as one subject, as an artist would, in the story or history, I'm convinced that we better understand both ourselves as subject and scholar, and the historical figure as subject and topic. And perhaps as a millennial generation scholar who grew up in a post-erudite era when deconstructivism reigned, I am particularly inclined to welcoming subjectivity even in the space of historical scholarship. So I offer that as a caveat. When oral histories, archival fragments, and community relationships are pivotal to the research project like this, I have found knowledge sharing and collective conversation to be transformative to what is possible as a singular researcher, the independent mind, or even more practically, the lone financer to gain access to materials spread across the country. Our mutual interests, mine and Sonja's and Hazel, means we're both thinking deeply and differently about one topic, and the products of our collaborative work are different yet connected. It's a new kind of generosity of spirit and sharing about the same subject that I've found personally and professionally enriching and expanding. And then the fourth and final question, how can we learn from the circumstances surrounding Hazel, her archive, her history, and legacy to inform a better understanding of the politics of the medium of photography? In the instance of Hazel at Black Mountain, for example, that her photographs have been reduced to the historical record of the institution, and of the other artists captured within the photographs rather than the photographs being received as an artwork in and of their own right, which they were. How can we learn from her circumstances to build new studies about historical women photographers who either similarly do not have archives currently held in the public trust, or do not, many a given a reason, leave material traces or retain the archive of their practice? or to open new modes of historical research and new methodologies for artistic and pedagogical practices in order to fill in the gaps of our archives. Thank you all again.
Okay, so to wrap up, I just want to ground you in one of the things that it's just a beautiful thing, and I do think maybe Hazel connected us, and I'm all about chasing her ghosts, but Meg has a history and is grounded in Tucson, although she's in Chicago right now, and I'm in Milwaukee, and so our two geographies are the bridge to Hazel's life in Black Mountain. And so we're really interested in kind of teasing out what happened in Milwaukee with Hazel being of first-generation Danish immigrants in Wisconsin and her physical transformation through polio. And then also how did she go on after Black Mountain to build opportunities and schools for thinking about photography. This last April, I was invited to Black Mountain College on this beautiful 2-week residency where they've just started this initiative where artists can live on campus. And this picture of Hazel's The Quiet House, which is this really beautiful room that was built as a Quaker meditation room on the grounds, is currently still there. And it was my studio for 2 weeks. So again, this interest in embodiment and being able to be in the place where Hazel spent so much of her life and really like discovering her own autonomy. It was the first time she was away from her family. She studied photography and then became the photography professor. And so I continue to work. This is my studio in the Quiet House, and the fireplace no longer works. A boys' camp actually bought the property right after the Black Mountain College closed in '57, and so it's kind of a time capsule. It's really wild. But there's a cabin above now. This is Hazel's studio that I have now begun to collage and work into, and I take Hazel's studio with me wherever I go, and I build collages into it and rephotograph it. And thank you very much.